able to, and one of those needs, when you're budgeting and you're putting in your budget, and you're building what those planned spending are, those needs, you also wanna include your savings, and you wanna include your tithing. Tithing should always be first. Anybody tell me why?
Put the Lord first.
What's the scripture for tithing? Malachi?
The burn? Fire
3:10?
insurance?
8 through 10. Somebody quote it? I just happen to have it here if somebody wants to read, or you can look it up. You're probably a little.
I'll read it,
Selena's
Bishop.
got it. She's offering
I'll
to
take it.
read it off your phone.
Here it is. I looked up Dr. Coach when we were looking up scripture with Brother Luna. I didn't have it saved. Okay, I wouldn't be winning any scripture chases today. Eight through 10? Somebody want to read it?
I'll read it.
Okay.
You said 8 through 10?
8 through 10, yeah, you'll need to skip down to 8.
Okay. Will a man rob God? Yet ye have robbed me. But ye say, Wherein have we robbed thee? In tithes and offerings. Ye are cursed with a curse, for ye have robbed me, even this whole nation. Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house, and prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it.
Okay, so what's the promise if you pay your tithing?
You'll receive more than
Then you can contain. Basically, the windows of heaven open. And there's not very many scriptures that you'll find where the Lord says, prove it, prove me herewith. I'll prove it to you, test me. And that's a literal thing. I can't tell you if you will put the Lord to the test, you need to allow Him to bless you. And the way you do that is you live the commandments, as Brother Luna said, be obedient. So no matter what job you have, or if you have a gift from an inheritance or whatever it is, make sure that you remember to include the Lord in your contributions. If you make that a priority on that plan list, you can move the chair wherever you want if you want to sit on the front row, Dante. I'll try not to spit on you, but you know.
Do you have any more of these?
Oh yeah, here you go. I have some more. Dante, here.
Yeah.
You scared him, Bishop. You went all the way to the back.
It's what?
You made him go all the way to the back. You scared him.
No, he's a back row guy. I know that. I can relate. Where do you see Dante in church?
In the back.
On the back row. The back row kind of guy.
That's a good back.
So anyway, so when you're listing those needs in budgeting, you put your needs together, and what your wants are, and keep your wants separate from what your needs are, and budget for them. If you're gonna go to a movie once a week, or twice a month, or whatever, if you're gonna go out for pizza, budget it, put it in your budget so that you plan for it, and it's in the budget, and if it's not in the budget, take it out. Kind of a funny story that my sister-in-law probably didn't like me to tell, but when her and her husband, my brother, got married, she had never run a household, she'd never run a checkbook, she never had a checkbook. And she kept bouncing checks. And my brother said, just because there's checks in the checkbook doesn't mean there's money in the bank. And so they actually, he took the checkbook and tore it up, and he came with his paycheck home every week, and they have their needs list, an envelope that represented each one of those. And he divided it up, and he put, here's our $100 for this and $100 for that, whatever it was that they budgeted on their planned spending list. And so, it said, we're not gonna rob from one to the other. When one's empty, that's it, we don't have any more for the month. And so, hopefully you're able to control your checkbook, but a credit card's the same way. Does anybody know what the rule of 72 is? Can you tell me what the rule of 72 is? The rule of 72, well, I'm drawing them together smart. The rule of 72 is if you take the rate of return that you make on your investment and you divide it into 72, that will tell you how many years it takes your investment to double at that rate. So if you're making 6%, it takes, you know, you're having math class today, did you? 6 into 72 is 12 years. So if you're making 6% on your investment, you put it in 12 years, it would double. So you had $100,000, it would double. $10,000 becomes $20,000 in 10 years. And so if you're making 12%, it would take you 6 years to double. What do you think the banks are making on a credit card when you are paying 29% on your credit card?
The rest,
The what?
the percentage?
Yeah, if it's 29%, or let's round off at 30% into 72, how many times that go? Basically, roughly 2.5 times. So every 2.5 years, the bank's doubling their money on you when you're paying 29% on a credit card. That's why it's so important to remember and realize the power of compounding interest, how much it affects you when you're borrowing money. Because that's essentially what you do when you borrow credit, and you have a credit card and you're borrowing money. They're extending credit to you at 29% interest. Some of them are 19, most are over 20, credit cards. So if you have a credit card, the other day, somebody went in and to borrow for a bank, to go to the bank, for a car, and they wanted to buy a car. Since they had no credit, they were just starting out. What do you think the interest rate was on that car? 18.9%. And not only that, in addition to the $16,000 for the car, they wanted to add another $3,000 for extended warranties. But the extended warranty was only good for 36 months, but the loan was for 52 months. Do you think that's a good deal? Because the $3,000, if you compound it out over the life of the loan, would end up paying over $6,000. And, you know, in a car, when you think about it, and this is the reason I bring that up, is not to pick on anybody, but be educated when you're purchasing, or get somebody to help you look at it. And if any of you have questions, come in, I'll look at it, I'll help you look at the contract. But be aware of what you're doing, because they're out to make money, they're not out to help you. They may sound like they're, you know, nice and they want to help you, but, you know, Satan's the master of all lies, so be careful, is all I'm saying, because you don't need a warranty, it's all optional. The dealership makes a lot of money, and that's one of the most highest profit centers, is selling a warranty. So if you're gonna go in and talk about, you know, and that goes with buying anything, buying a house, major items, buying a car, make sure you're aware, get some help from somebody that's an advocate for you. A realtor selling a house is not an advocate, it's a buyer beware if they're selling it to you. So get you somebody who represents you in the transaction if you don't know what you're doing. Or take and spend a little money to get an attorney to look at it, or a financial advisor. Somebody who can at least look at it and say, you know, this is the risks that you have, do you really want to take this risk? The other thing I have on here talking about credit. Anybody tell me what a FICO score is? No?
I don't know the exact definition, but I know that it basically breaks down your credit usage, how much debt you have, and it tells you how your progress is. So the less debt you have, the higher the score.
Right, that's a fancy word for your credit score. Mm-hmm. Everybody has a credit score, and you know, sometimes, and there's people who will have a debate on it. They will tell you don't really need credit, so don't worry about it. If you listen to Dave Ramsey, he'll say, well, just operate it in cash, and so you don't need credit. I would disagree with that. I think everybody needs credit, because you can't buy a car, you can't buy a house, you can't finance, almost anything without credit. And Dave Ramsey's right, you shouldn't be financing things on credit and you should be able to pay cash. But there's some things that if you pay cash, you will not be able to acquire in your life. Most people will not be able to pay a lump sum of $500,000 to buy a home, for example. Most people won't be able to go and spend $40,000 for a car. It's almost essential, especially when you're young and getting started, to have credit so that you can, but you need to, again, plan spending. You need to manage what you're spending on and how you're spending it, because my mom used to tell me as a little kid, it's easy to borrow but hard to pay back. And that's a principle that's kind of true. They'll lend it to you, but you need to prove you don't need it, and then it's hard to pay it back if something happens. So many people plan, well, I make XYZ dollars per month. I make $3,000 a month, and so I can spend $3,000 a month. It's not how much you make a month. Again, you want to live within your means, but you want to also be able to build an emergency fund. How many of you have an emergency fund? I won't embarrass anybody, but when you think to yourself, how many do you have an emergency fund? An emergency fund should be 3 to 6 months of what your household expenses are. Your household expenses, so if your household expenses are $3,000 a month, you should have $9,000 at least that you can put your hands on. Why do we do that? So because when you lose your job, you get ill, you're injured, your refrigerator goes out, your car needs a major repair, you have assets to put your hands on without having to go down and borrow from and make an enemy out of every one of your friends.
It's like a saying of scared money, or you can't make money without money, or scared money don't make money.
That's correct. Yeah, you can't make money without making money, but if you don't have any money, where do you start? And that's why you need to establish credit. And so a FICO score is how your score, it's usually somewhere from 400 to people who either don't have credit or have never had credit, and it usually caps out around 850. Most people, to buy a home, you're gonna have to have at least 700. And the way you establish that is show that you are reliable in managing your debt. So when they look at things for your credit score, they look, how much debt do you have? If you have debt, have you made regular payments? Because if you don't make regular payments and you're late all the time, what do you think a creditor thinks about giving you more money? This person's really a risk. And some of the other things that you may not be aware of is, like if you're gonna go buy a car, they'll do what they call a credit inquiry, which is run your credit score. What's your credit score? They do a credit inquiry, and all of a sudden it comes back, and you've been trying to get credit all over town, buy a car. They're gonna say, well, wait a minute, there's 10 credit inquiries. This person's kind of a flake because they're trying to just find the best deal, and they're not really responsible. And sometimes that can be very damaging if you are a young person who's never had any credit, or an old person. If you don't have any credit and you're just applying and trying to build credit, they can actually hurt you if you went to 5 different dealerships. It's best to run your credit, go in with your credit. This is what my credit score, because you can get it free. Most credit bureaus will give you a credit report free once a year. And if you're denied or declined credit, then you can get another one for free at any time you're declined credit. So you don't want to be declined, but if you do, find out why and fix it. Sometimes, because those things stay on your credit report for 7 years. So sometimes you want to build credit intentionally. Anybody think of a way you can build credit intentionally? Yeah.
You could get a credit card and then pay, I get gas, my credit card, but then I pay it off.
Right. That's a great idea. What happens if you have never had a credit card and you apply and they say, oh, sorry, you are not a good credit risk? What do you do? How do you build credit? You never had credit, you barely have a job. What do you do?
Yeah, those debit cards now that function similar to credit cards.
Yeah, it's called a prepaid credit card. It's not really a debit card, but those are, I looked on the internet this week in preparing for this, talking about it, because it's a great way to, and I'm glad you brought that up. A deposit or a prepaid credit card, what you do is you're kind of working on your own money. You go in, and there's several, the one, I Googled it, and I think, well, it might have been Yahoo, I'm not sure, but anyway, I searched it on the internet, and there was one website that came up with the top 5 prepaid credit cards. And is what that means is that you can, as Danielle had said, you can buy a credit card and work on your own money. So they're not giving you a loan. You can put in $500, for example, and then just like Greg said, you can use it because they report that you make that payment every single year or every single month. And so at the end of the month, let's say you, out of your 500, you used $400 in gas. You put, when you get paid, you pay it off 0. So that shows responsible. So over a year's time, now you've kept a very good credit and paid 0 balance all the time, or caught, even if it went down to 100, you're always below what your own money is. So you're, 1 month you might pay 300 instead of 400 if that's what you spent on it. But the idea is you're gonna pay an interest if you leave it on there, because they're still charging you interest to keep it for you. It's not free money, but it is a way to build credit and use your own money. Instead of paying cash everywhere you go, you can actually build your credit, and that reports to the credit bureaus that you're responsible in managing your credit. And so, I remember my son's first, he came home off his mission and applied for a job and put his credit card, or his social security number down, and they came back and said, that's not your social security number. And he said, I've had that social security number since I was born. Somebody had hacked his social security number and been using it for 10 years. As a kid, he didn't have a job, he did sports and all that stuff in high school. So when it was after his mission, he applied for his first job, and they had to do a security check to see who he was. They said, that's not your social security number. So he actually got a letter from the social security number, and they said, no, that's not good enough. There's somebody else that has that social security number. So I actually hired a private investigator. They looked at his social security number, and he said, if you give it to me, and paid him his fee, he actually went and came up, there's some guy in Florida had been using his social security number for 10 years. And he was using somebody else's social security number. He had 3 social security numbers he was using.
Them scammers.
And so he had to file a report with the police. They gave him a copy of the dossier that the private investigator had put together. And then they said, well, it's not that you don't have credit. It's not that you don't have credit, you just don't have any credit, because it's brand new, and we erased the file basically on the other guy after your police report. So he started over, fresh. The first thing he financed was the wedding ring for his engagement with his wife, and he paid it off. He made a few payments. I think he made 6 payments, and then paid it off just to build his credit. And now he's bought 3 homes over their marriage of 10 years, and has very good credit. But it takes a lot of work, but you really want to make sure you maintain good credit, and it's a horrible start, but all of us have, when you're starting out, you'll make mistakes, and so you want to build that credit as fast as you can. So, and because you're going to need it, whether you're going to school, whether you're borrowing money to go to buy a car. When you first start out, you're going to need credit, because as I said at the beginning of our remarks, the next 10 years are the most expensive time of your life. And those decisions that you make in that 10 years can affect the rest of your life. And that's why it's a good idea for, thinking about careers, what you're going to do for a living, because, this adulting stuff is not fun sometimes. My Michelle puts it, Dad, I don't like adulting. So, anyway, is there any questions that you want me to answer or address before we go on to the next topic? Okay, so we covered the budgeting ideas, we covered credit scores and why it's important to have. And I guess we can talk about getting out of debt too. That's kind of the next, if you flip over your next page. you'll see a little bar, a little graph here that I had the assistant put together. This is just a sample, okay, and it's an idea of how do you prioritize to get out of debt if you have debt accumulated. Hopefully you don't have debt, but if you do, these are ideas that and they're probably a little higher, we hope, than what you have in your debt, but the idea you have, this came from that planned spending seminar I talked about at the beginning I went to at the OU. It was a professor, an economics professor from Canada that was actually a guest speaker at the OU talking about how to get out of debt. And this is what is, how he prioritized what you're getting in debt. Most people would say, well, let's get the highest interest rate and pay that one off first. Got a credit card, so how do we prioritize what debt we do? And this is kind of a sample here. We have, I just threw it together, $3,000 on a credit card, $18,000 on a car, what your gas card is, and your student loans. And I just grabbed those because those would be, I thought would be something, but whatever debts you have, this is a way to do it. Take your minimum payment that you have, so on your credit card at your minimum payment, how long do you think it'll take you to pay off a credit card on a minimum payment?
A lot, like years.
Years.
3 years.
3 years.
I do
More
over.
like 10 years.
Yeah, I always do like a few
Cause they're
hundred
just
a
charging a little bit. If they're making 29% on their card, how long do they want you to have that card?
For a long time.
6
For a long
years,
time.
5 years.
But also, they'll look at it, back on the FICO score, that's one of the things I didn't mention. When they pull a FICO score and run your credit, they'll look and see what your debt is. So if you have 3 credit cards for $10,000 each, and this is just, I mean, whatever it is, but for $3,000 each, that would be $30,000 that you could borrow. If you're borrowing $28,000 to $29,000 all the time, and you're just maintaining paying the minimum payment only, what do you think that does to your credit score? Goes down, because you're pushing the limit of how much you can borrow. Now, if you had a 3 credit cards at $10,000 each, and you had $2,000 balance on each, now what do they say? And that you're showing that you're responsible, even though you could borrow $30,000, you're only borrowing 6, and you're paying regular payments on to maintain that. So if you run it up, you pay it down, and so that will build your credit if you're keeping a minimal balance on it. But if you're pushing your limit, you have an eligibility to borrow $30,000 and you're borrowing 28 all the time, you only have $2,800 or $2,000 to wiggle room, and then you're over your limit. And so if you go over your limit, same thing. Those are all things that ding you on your credit. So you want to make sure that you pay regular payments, you pay them off, or you pay substantial amounts if you can't pay it all off. And if you're going to buy a car or do something, you do planned spending. And this is a way to itemize which one. We don't just pay a little bit on each one. Is what you do is you pay your minimum payment, but you take your lowest number. So on this example, the lowest number would be your credit card on the top. So you pay your minimum payment on those other payments and pay off the credit card. You'll probably need a credit card, but in theory is what you want to do is plastic surgery. Everybody know what I mean by plastic surgery? Cut your credit card. Yeah. But you'll need a credit card because if you go to a hotel or you travel or whatever, everybody wants a credit card. So you need a credit card. Just keep it controllable. Again, planned spending. Don't just go wild because you have a credit card. That's not an automatic loan. That's just so that you can meet the deposit security requirements or to pay for a room when you're traveling. I mean, it is convenient, but don't let it get the best of you. Okay, so you would pick the lowest, and then once you pay off the credit card, that debt's gone. Then you go to the next and you apply all your extra cash per month, or what you planned to apply to your debt reduction to your next payment. That's 36. So once that's paid off, and it'll accelerate it because you're paying the minimum payment on everything except the one. You're paying that off to accelerate it, pay it off. So according to him, by using this method, you'd be out of debt in 5 years. So I thought that was pretty aggressive, but again, it's having the plan spending, so that you're in control instead of just, by chance, oh, I'll pay my tithing when I get to it, I'll pay my car payment when I get to it. You can't do that, it'll repossess your car. You know, you have to, be aware and conscientious. I would say you need to be a, good steward of the money that the Lord blesses you with. And by so doing, he will bless you and prosper as he promised in Malachi, the scripture we read earlier. You need to be responsible. He's blessing you. You pay your tithing, you pay yourself, you'll find that you never want, because you're living within your means. And you'll be blessed for doing that, and you'll be aware of what your money's doing. Any questions on this stuff? Okay, I think we've covered all of this stuff. Now, savings accounts, we'll talk about. Can anybody tell me what kind of bank accounts you can go buy? What kind of bank accounts do we have?
Checking, I have a checking and
Savings,
savings.
checking.
For savings.
Okay, what if you wanna make a higher rate of return than savings? What's an option? It's what? Certificate of deposit. And money market. Money markets in general. And what are the difference of all those? I don't know if anybody's ever had classes, but what's the difference of all those accounts?
Like how liquid it is,
Mhm.
and the term that you can.
Correct. So, kind of think of the name of a certificate of deposit is a time deposit. So you're gonna tie your money up for, 11 months, a year, 3 years. And then generally, it used to be the longer the deposit, but now banks are nervous about having commitments longer than a year. So you can actually get a higher deposit for a year than you can for 3 years. Because it pays you a higher rate, because the rates are more predictable. But rates have come up a little bit. There for a while it was just 2 or 3%. Now you can actually get a rate around 4% at the bank. So, and they have IRAs and things like that as well. But typically you have a checking account. Checking account usually doesn't pay interest. Usually it's just a convenience. Sometimes they'll charge you a fee to have a checking account if you don't maintain a certain balance in your other accounts. A savings account is just a passbook savings. It's secure. You can get to it anytime. A money market is a glorified savings account. Money market is generally, they limit how much you can take out of it, but they pay you a higher rate of return for it. Usually you can only write 3 checks a month out of it, but you can't have checking on your money market accounts. Your certificate deposits just depends on how long you want to tie it up and pay you the rate of return. But those are most of your products at banks, and then they, of course, will do loans and all those kind of things. I like for young people to, if it's long-term savings that you plan on having, for example, if you're saving for a house, or you're saving for a specific item, but it's gonna be a long-term savings, like 5 years or more, then I would look at a Roth IRA. Sometimes if your employer, where you're employed, if you're like a school teacher, they can have a post-tax or pre-tax, a Roth 401k or a 403b versus a traditional. Anybody can tell me what the difference between a Roth and a traditional IRA or savings account and 401k is?
Taxes,
Okay, how in the taxes?
like when I'm paying the taxes.
Exactly. Oh, you're good on this.
I worked at a credit union when I was here now.
There you go. So your traditional IRA or 401k or 403b, 403b is for school teachers or school and district employees. So you have 403b, 401k, those both have an option in most employers to have a traditional or a pre-tax and a post-tax. Pre-tax would be your traditional, post-tax is the Roth option. So pre-tax, you pay taxes, you don't pay taxes, you actually get a deduction from your salary. So if you're making $30,000 a year and you put in $8,000, then your tax liability would be on $22,000 instead of $30,000 if you put it in pre-tax. So when do you pay the taxes on that? If you get to put it in pre-tax, when do you pay the taxes on it? Pardon?
We take it out of the.
Right, when you take it out. The theory was that when retire at 65, your tax bracket, your income's gonna be lower than when you contribute to it. Now, does anybody think with the national debt that we have, that the tax brackets are gonna go down or up? What do you think?
They're gonna go up.
They're probably gonna go up. So, kind of the current thought is pay the tax now and have it grow without taxation, because the advantage is all of your growth grows without taxation. So if you put it in a Roth account, you pay the tax, but you put it in a Roth account, it grows without taxation, and all the earnings grow without taxation. So when you're ready to pull it out 59.5, it's tax-free.
Okay.
If you pull it out before, when you contribute to a Roth IRA, you can pull out the principal at any time without taxation, because you already paid the tax on the principal. So if you're making contributions over your lifetime, and your Roth IRA grows, and that's what your example is here in your chart, this is showing $500 a month. You put in $500 a month, and if you started each month, and this will take you out over, this started in 1986, and takes you to 2021. I think, how many is that, 45 years? But the key is, anybody look and tell me what the earnings would be on that? It's about 3 pages down. This is an actual portfolio that if you could have invested at $500 a month, everybody going $500 a month, but how many people pay a car payment of $500 a month? It's less than a house payment for sure. But if you put that $500 a month, to go back to you could take it out any time, the principal. So if you're saving for a house at $500 a month, at the end of 5 years, you put in $30,000. So in you could take $30,000. What did we talk about? How much it costs you to put down on a house? You know, somewhere around $50,000. So as a couple or as an individual, if you're saving and you're putting that down, if you're funding it, and again for a specific purpose, in 5 years you'd have that money to pull out. Anyway, if you go down it's on page 8. Somebody find page 8? How much would it be worth if you put in from 1986 to 2021, $5,000 a year? Or, $6,000 a year. This is participation. Let's look at your handout. What's that?
2 million, well, more than 2 million.
Right, 2,271,000. So if I were to say, how many of you want to retire as a millionaire? Why wouldn't you want to? So, anyway, with that, we're done. Does anybody have any questions before we go? I know I just.
So finding a Roth IRA to what bank would you?
I wouldn't go to a bank.
What do you go to?
Go to some investment advisor like myself. Banks have guys that say they do what I do, but none of ours goes right. But that's just me talking.
Well, cause the banks also have to pay their board of directors and stuff, but if you go to like a private advisor, they don't have to pay like the
My
board.
kids do have to wear shoes though, so you know.
So that's a board.
There is a cost, but that's net after all expenses that you're seeing there. The idea is just to inspire you to save. And you don't have to do $500 a month. You can start with $100 a month. Start with $50 a month. The idea is to build that savings account, but this is for long term. You want to have a 3 to 6 month emergency fund to begin with, because that's really, you're going to need that. If your engine goes out on your car, you have to, get a refrigerator, whatever. I mean, life happens and it's expensive. But again, go to planned spending instead of just, well, if I have any left, I'll pay my tithing. Because then the Lord can't bless you if you don't let Him, right? Yeah.
I just have one comment about that. When I was paying tithing, I would always say what Bishop was saying, that if you leave your responsibilities to be first and then tithing, you're never gonna have room to pay your tithing. So my rule of thumb was when I got paid, I'd pay my 10% and then pay my responsibilities
Selena, they
after.
all of them don't know you don't have a job, so you might
No,
tell them.
I'm
you know,
just saying before
back
when I
paid
was
tithing, it's not like,
working.
well, I don't pay tithing now, but when
No,
I did.
I don't have a job right now, you guys, but what I'm saying was when I was, I would always pay tithing first, and there was always room left over or enough to pay bills, because if you say, oh, I'm gonna see if I have any left over, and then you end up leaving it for whatever, and you never pay your tithing, so I always say pay tithing first, and then everything else will be taken care of by the
Yeah, it's
blessings.
planned spending, yeah.
Priorities.
My biggest thing with my parents was my due date was June 2nd, but I was born April 16th. And all of the things that they were able to use immediately maxed out within like my first like maybe 15-20 minutes of life. Cause I had every problem known to man. I wasn't breathing, like all these things were wrong until like they did the cap, and because they were tithing payers, at one point they got a notice saying that like half of it was just, it didn't exist anymore. Like they had no idea what had happened, but it just didn't exist anymore. And I was just like, I wonder how much of a different situation they would have been in if they didn't pay tithing.
Miracles
Because,
happen. If you talk to
like,
people who pay tithing,
You
they will
put
tell
God
you
first,
stories
you're
like
going to be
that.
blessed.
Yeah.
And that's it.
But you have to pay your tithing to allow the Lord to bless you. You know, he says, prove it. I would say, I encourage you to prove it. You need to pay tithing and plan your spending, how you're spending. It's not just bad budgeting. Don't look in the rearview mirror. Look forward and allocate your money and how you plan.
The car I have, that I drive, it's not in my name, almost has 200,000 miles on it. It was a family car before I started driving it. Last month we got a check engine light. And my dad looks at me and goes, it's a transmission. You can either, I'm like, I don't have the money to buy it off of you right now, but I'm willing to fork over 90% of my savings account to pay for it. Magically, the light went off. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, and I don't take it anywhere besides church and work. It's lasting, hopefully, until I have a better paying job. But my parents and I have put tithing first and everything else, and that just, it seemed to.
And knowing that
magically
you
appear.
want it, you know, you should be able to put some kind of savings
Yeah.
away and those
Oh,
are
yeah.
things. And again, that's
had a
sitting
magical
down
check from-
and taking time to plan out your finances.
My card freaks me
Uh,
out.
Just like you do with your exercise program or your diet, you need to do the same with your finances, so. Lord bless you.
Yes.
Guys, thanks for coming. I think they have you in the primary room.